Welcome back to Following No Adana Stormlight podcast. This week is our Wind and Truth preview chapters week 9, and we're in chapters 16, 17, and 18 of Wind and Truth. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. David, how are you doing?
I'm sleepy, but hanging in there. New child, newborn babies don't let you sleep.
True. Let's roll intro, and then we get more Way of Kings to read. So I'm going to read it after we roll intro. Okay. 3 chapters this week, 16, 17, and 18. None of them are short. I mean, we had a half-hour one, a 20-minute one, and a 16-minute one. And the epigraphs go like this. They had left behind family and hereditary home, something many would find unconscionable. What I learned from their glyphs, scribbled in dust, trembled my soul. It was because of me and the stories they'd heard of my teachings that they had left. They'd gone to seek a land some told them was mythical.
There's one word that really sticks out to me, and ranks, you're just hovering over it. It's unconscionable.
Yeah, because I thought I knew what it meant, and then I looked it up and I was like, yeah, that is what it meant. And so it's like, it seems like a strange word to use there.
Very strong.
It might be personal, because it gets implications of being immoral. Like, not just like, I don't understand why they would do it, but it's literally an immoral action to do. It's not acceptable to society, right? So that's what I thought it meant, and that is what it means. And I was like, so yeah, just leaving behind your family, leaving behind where you grew up. Like, there's kind of a concept of, you know, this village raised you, your family raised you, and you know, made you who you are, and you're abandoning them. And they're doing it for, we don't really know why they're doing it yet, right? Other than seeking a mythical land,
which I initially assumed was Urithiru. So if some considered it mythical, I don't know if that would be reliable then or not. But the unconscionable thing, I just kind of wrote off as some cultures, especially at this time, do not migrate and would consider migrating dangerous or, you know, unconscionable. So I didn't highlight that word super heavy like you two did. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, I don't know. It stuck out to me because Sanderson doesn't usually use words like that. And he's trying to be more flowery because it's Way of Kings, but still, even within other Way of Kings quotes we've had, I don't remember words like that, and so it really stuck out to me. And I'm glad it stuck out to you as well, Tim. So at least I have someone on my side. When I heard they've gone to seek a land, you know, more mythical land or whatever, I immediately thought of Dawn Shard, and I thought of the girl who looked up. So I don't think the timing is right for it being people leaving Shinovar, but it could be a what's the word? A parable for what happened with people leaving Shinovar, which might be you know, one of the oldest texts available that talks about it. So maybe we're getting a little bit misled here, and this is actually going to be talking about Shinovar, which we know we're about to visit. So
okay.
So like,
I can see that.
It's a parable about leaving your homeland and how it's unconscionable to do so, but they did so anyway. And it's like, what I learned from their glyphs trembled my soul. Like, he's using words like unconscionable, trembled my soul. He's being very strong about how they're leaving their family, they're leaving their hereditary home. Like it feels like he's being very judgmental here in terms of the story they told.
I went
I
back. Oh, go ahead.
I was taking it as Noadon was surprised that other cultures were listening to his teachings, or they'd heard about him and gave it enough weight to alter their lives to go searching on this mythical land, whatever that is. Because Noadon's a pretty humble guy, but he goes down in history like pretty historically. But I don't really think that happens in his time. Maybe it does.
What is the time? So this is in Way of Kings, but his
Right.
teachings, as far as I knew, was the Way of Kings.
Right.
So
Yeah.
does,
I mean, I agree with you. And the Way of Kings could just be a collection of all of them, like maybe even posthumous. I don't even know how to say that. After he died.
yeah. So we know that, for example, like Sanderson does like to pull from Earth religions a lot, and so we know that the Bible was, not written all at once. It,
Right.
historically, from a historian perspective, at least, it was written over many centuries, and things were added, things were removed, things were changed. So, it could be that the Way of Kings is a similar thing, where some of the parables in it are much, much newer stories compared to some of the parables that were originally in it, and that could have been passed around a lot and revised over some period of time. Maybe not all of them were even written by Noadon, for all we know. But for consistency's sake, it's all credited to Noadon.
Sure.
And so in that case, yeah, I mean, what you said has turned me a little bit. I didn't quite understand why you said Eurythera at first, but could this be the beginning of the Radiance?
Well, and at the beginning of the Way of Kings, that's where he says he's going. So
True.
could they be joining him? That's what I was thinking, is that I'm on this journey to get to Eurythera. I'm going from Abamabar to Eurythera, whether that's physically or spiritually or whatever. And so my writings, them hearing about me has motivated them to get up and move. That's how I interpreted this, that they're also on their journey to go to Eurythera, either figuratively or literally.
Yeah. But I'm thinking about the Invisitors and their goal, right? They wanted to bring back the Radiance. Could this be the original, not necessarily the Invisitors, but the original concept of that, where people left their homes to become radiant?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that this could have been, well, since he founded the Knights Radiant, and perhaps they'd heard of this mythical land where Surge Binders weren't rulers; they helped the people. I went back and I read both of the visions that Dalinar had. The one that was from the Stormfather, and then the one that wasn't a vision, may have been just a dream, but seemed like it was more. And there were a few things I noticed in that. On one was he started the Knights Radiant, so this could be perhaps near the end of his life that he's telling this, when people are really starting to come and build out what became the 10 epoch kingdoms. And then also a large part of it was his uncertainty. In the first vision, he wonders if he should even still be a king. And you can see that shine through both in his perception of using the word unconscionable and trembling his soul. It's partially how he sees it, as well as partially how the culture around him has perceived this situation.
In terms of timing, I don't know if this is evidence or not, but do we know if Noadon was radiant, and if so, was he a bondsmith?
I've had this conversation before, and I don't remember, to be frank with you. There's evidence that he's not surprised by what Dalinar is doing in like visions and stuff, but as far as he jumps out a window and is completely fine. So is he radiant? Yes, probably. I think is the conclusion we came to. Bondsmith, I don't know.
The reason I bring it up is bondsmiths can easily understand any language, and here he's having to communicate via, scribblings, glyphs.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So this could be pre-radiance, pre him becoming radiant.
Sure. I mean, we are in the fourth parable, so presumably it's early.
It leads credence to this being like I don't know, a story about becoming radiant, perhaps. Like maybe, like, why bring up? He's leaning so heavily and bringing up so many times that he doesn't actually understand them, and he's gleaned all this from glyphs. Like maybe part of this parable is gaining the ability to understand others through connection or something like that. I don't know, just another thought. That's my last thought on that, though.
Yeah, I don't have too much more for that. All right. What do we start with? A Shalon POV for the first half of this first chapter. She's back with her Lightweavers. I didn't get too much out of this. Did any of you see, like, they're starting back their relationship with the Ghostbloods? They're spying on each other. Like, I worded that poorly. They're beginning their fight with the Ghostbloods is how I should word that. But I don't know. There wasn't anything that really stuck out to me in here. What about you guys?
Something did stick out to me, which is Shalon thinks she's gaining the upper hand against the Ghostbloods, and already we know that she's not, because she says, "Oh, we have information that they don't about Kalak." But guess what? Like, we just saw that Felt had Kalak captured. Now the question is whether Felt, since he seems to be kind of a different Ghostblood faction, is he going to share that information with Eotl?
Yeah, that is. I did think about this, that with the interlude that we just got, which now is obvious why we're getting the interludes in the order we are. We know that Eotl's in the tower based off the two or based off chapter 18. I think Hoyd is like giving her updates on Eotl, or at least was in the tower. Is that right?
I didn't catch that, if she is.
No, I don't think it was that she was in the tower, but that this was who Wit knows is a Ghostblood working on Roshar.
Okay.
Yeah, Wit had promised to provide pictures of all the known Ghostblood members. And the interesting thing is he provided 2 new members who just arrived on planet, and they're in Urithiru, right? That we learn near the end of these chapters.
Okay. And they're Malwish,
and
both of them.
They're both, well, they're both similar to Eotl, right? There
Right.
seems to be some sort of hunter faction that broke, left Scadrial a while ago, it seems like.
Mhm.
I don't know. Yotl's past is still a bit fuzzy. Maybe we'll learn more. But yeah, so these 2 like probably are using medallions at the very least. But it seems like all Ghostbloods have different magics. Like they probably all have breath at least. It's getting more and more important to have read the other Cosmere novels to understand what's going on.
Yeah. If you want to understand the mechanics, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can always just say, "Oh, that's a magic system from off-world," so of course I don't understand it. But
well, and kind of a sidetrack here. At the end of Rhythm of War, the way that Paul and Elliot have read the Cosmere, at the end of Rhythm of War, both of them were really uninterested in the Ghostbloods. They did not care about whatever Shalon was doing with the Ghostbloods. As we're honing back in on Stormlight, both of them are excited to tune in with the Ghostbloods on Roshar and see what happens between Stormlight 5 and Mistborn Era 2. Because I think in Mistborn Era 2 specifically, you get some really interesting ideas about the Ghostbloods. So if you're listening to this and haven't read Mistborn Era 2, I would encourage it. but might be too late at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the spoiler scope of this podcast is everything published. We warned them about that. So,
Right.
I will say, isn't there evidence in the Lost Metal? Like Kelsier literally says Yaddle's still alive. So that's something
Yes.
we can build into our theories here.
Or
and also like not on Scadrol still.
yes. So in the Lost Metal, the Ghostbloods on Scadrial assume Yaddle is still on Roshar at the time of the Lost Metal. They make that assumption. They haven't heard from her, but they make that assumption that she's still on Roshar.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's not as clear cut. Do they just not communicate that often with each other?
I don't know.
Is it like normal to just go silent for 30 years?
It's a good question. I would assume the same assumption they're making is that she's still on Roshar and she's still alive. So
okay.
Yeah, if you lose your method of communication, it's really hard to find another one.
The other thing I got from this chapter was it was similar to the Bridge 4 chapter, right? Where it's like we're almost saying goodbye to some of these people. It's like Sanderson's like, before Shallan goes off into Fuzzy Wuzzy land, like let's show how her her group has progressed and what they're doing and how they're all dealing with their truths, and some are close, some aren't. That's the feeling I got, is like it's a similar kind of let's check in on them because we might not see them again this series.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that segues pretty well. I wanted to talk about Gaz and his perspective a little bit with this chapter. He's got two sides, and at one point he's talking about how very minimizing his responsibility for the way he acted towards Bridge 4, and saying that his harshness produced them. But then there's strong words and his friends laughing at him, saying, well, actually, no, you were just crying about how terrible it was that you were terrible to him. So I think he's still growing. He recognizes he's done some terrible things, but he's still working through that. And so even if he's purely just joking about it, it's a way to like distract from himself with that. It's interesting to see his growth, and honestly, really funny to see him. His disguise is he's a little girl.
I had a couple thoughts about that. First, really mirrors Amaram, right? Amaram had a conversation with Kaladin. We all know Kaladin's response to that was about the spear that didn't break. And so, Kaladin would completely disagree with Gaz on that point because Amaram made the same point. And so maybe this is a way of showing like how Amaram could have overcome the way that he was thinking about that, which could be interesting. The second thing is, I guess we're just talking about Gaz in general through all these chapters. Near the end, he talks about how he's been not gambling because, his friends are basically going around saying, don't let him gamble. If he wanted to gamble, he could light weave and be someone else. So like, it doesn't actually stop him. So that's evidence to me that like, he again, like using these excuses where he's lying to himself, which is very Lightweaver thing of like, you could still gamble if you wanted to. It's just, you can't gamble as you. And, maybe there's something to that where he's able to use a kind of a flimsy excuse to help himself avoid gambling.
I really like that. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. He absolutely could hold on to gambling if he wanted to, if he was really committed to it, but he wants to let it go. So he is. So I do like that.
He's avoiding taking responsibility for doing it himself. He's like, oh, I can't because of this reason or that reason, which at least is better than I can't stop because of this reason or that reason. So I feel like there is some growth there, and he might be close to, that truth.
Just kind of about Gaz in general, I think it's really odd. Not that I dislike it or like it or whatever. I think it's really odd that Gaz is still around. He seemed like such a throwaway character for the first like for the first book, and then he shows up in the second book. You're like, oh yeah, I vaguely remember this guy, and then he just shows up again, and then he's here. Like, you know, not a B tier character by any means, the C or D plot line or whatever, but he's still here. What that seems like such an odd thread to push all the way through from Sanderson. Just thought that was weird.
I think it's neat. I mean, maybe he's representative again of, like, Sanderson picked him as being representative of some larger concept or larger group of people.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
since we know Gaz, and Gaz is another one of those characters where we hated him when we first met him, so it's harder for us to accept his redemption arc,
Right.
as opposed to Dalinar, where we met him mid redemption arc.
Mhm.
So we're able to accept, like, we learn 2 books later what Dalinar did, which honestly is some of the most horrific stuff in the entire series, or in the Cosmere in general. And still we're like, ooh, Dalinar's my favorite character. Like, so I think Sanderson's like, okay, can I redeem Gaz? And then now, okay, can I redeem Moash? Right? It gets harder and harder. But I feel like that's kind of thematic. And now having Gaz say things similar to what Amram said, and Amram did not get redeemed. Like, can we read what is the limit to redemption? Is there a limit? Or does it just come down to the person and their who they become over their
Mhm.
journey?
Yeah, it's very much their willingness to continue working. Um, it I don't like Gaz for those reasons, but I like the story that he's been brought on. I want to talk a little bit more about the Ghost Bloods, and then we moved on. But this chapter, it was rather forgettable. But there were a few things that made me think of a Cold War spy movie. The spies, they see each other in a public place. They both know they're both spies, and they're acting angsty. They don't want to get into a fight, but they know they might. Very much a Cold War movie there, and I'm very curious to see how that could go forward, either in this book or in other books, maybe in the Ghost Bloods book that we'll see. Yeah, we also see Morse code, so that's some of the technology that is being developed that they knew about, but I think it's just another one of those things that when we come back in 30 years and technology is different, these are the clues we're seeing. What did you guys think about those?
I found it interesting that Morse code was credited to the Windrunners. I wonder why Windrunners aren't particularly scholarly. Like, why would it be the
Or
Windrunners who
inventive.
invented? Yeah, I would think some, like, the scholarly Radiants, or even just the scholars who aren't Radiant, maybe could have invented that. So why specifically credit the Windrunners was weird to me. But did I misread that, or did you guys catch that too?
I think that was in there. I think you're right.
Yeah.
It made me wonder if it came from Sigzil or someone who specifically knew about it beforehand and was just introducing it or something like that, as opposed to
Sigil
like
makes sense.
invented it. I don't know.
Why do I always forget about Sigzil?
Yeah. And of course, most of the Windrunners are men who can't read and they still need to communicate over long distances. Plus, when they're flying, they can't talk.
True.
Very good points, but Morse code is still reading.
True. But is
I
it
would say.
different enough that it wouldn't be like faux pas, however that is?
But you'd still have to learn letters and how they form words. You'd have to learn to read to understand unless the code is like
Unless
a
it's
glyph
glyphs.
code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
It could be more like a sign language where, you're less worried about spelling and more just these blinkies are these words, and they have like a limited vocabulary. Not that I'm saying sign language has limited vocabulary, but this would, because you can only do so many codes with blinkies.
Mm-hmm.
right.
There was something else you said I wanted to touch on. Just in general, kind of the spy versus spy stuff. Until you brought it up, I didn't even think of it. But yeah, I think that is what Sanderson's going for, is like a, like a spy versus spy like story, which is fun.
I'm curious if the Ghost Bloods hang around for 6 through 10, or if they're like evacuated and into like they go off into Mistborn and they're not here. I could see it go either way.
I think the Ghost Bloods have a lot of operations happening outside of Scadrial. They may or may not stay on Roshar, but I think that they're an intercosmere organization. Like they're kind of the FBI and the CIA combined for Scadrial, is kind of my thought on that. And so they do stuff within the planet and mostly protect Scadrial from external threats, but then they also go out and do stuff on other worlds, kind of an infiltration. And
yeah, I'm certainly expecting to see them in other series besides Mistborn. I'm just wondering if the Roshar's really hard to get to line disqualifies them from from Stormlight Era 2 or not.
I think if they show up, it will be in a much smaller capacity.
Okay.
Either much smaller, or it's Roshar versus Gadriel Epic War, and they're like the secret agents. But I think it'll be more of a smaller capacity, because I've got this big theory that the Ghost Bloods want Ba-Edo Mishram's prison specifically, not just to learn how to get Kelsier off of Scadrial, but they want that prison because they want to understand how to trap a powerful godlike being. I think they want to trap harmony or discord, and they see that as a problem in their way, someone they will have to fight eventually. So I think it's Batman setting up to take down Superman if they have to.
How does that play in with the fact that they just saw Dalinar do it to the Thrill, though? I think there's something. I think you might. I mean, that could be an aspect, and I can't disagree with that. That seems like something that looking into ways to deal with shards seems like something the Ghost Bloods would do. But I do think there's probably at least more to it that's specific to Ba-Edo Mishram's role in things and abilities.
Well, I think it might just be as simple as control over Roshar. That they're looking to traffic Stormlight and Voidlight on and off Roshar. If you can control all the cognitive shadows moving in on and off Roshar, then I mean, I think that helps you quite a bit.
I agree in a lot of ways with you, Trevor, there. Their ultimate goal isn't get Stormlight off Roshar. Their ultimate goal is we need an easy source of investiture that we can use anywhere. And we know that Ba-Edo Mishram provided Voidlight in lieu of Odium doing it. So could Ba-Edo Mishram be transported around and be convinced to provide Voidlight at will? If so, that's an extremely powerful resource. Because, right now, like, it seems like breath is the easiest to get, and it's not that easy to get. Like, breath is one of the worst forms of investiture out there in terms of being able to acquire it, because you need to convince 1,000 people to give you their breath, or however many. That's hard to collect. Whereas, like, if you just have an entity who's like, pray to me and you'll get void light, connect to me and you get void light as much as you want, wherever you are, like, okay, I'll take that, please.
Yeah.
I think part of it is also the fact that her prison is in the spiritual realm. And so if they can learn more about accessing the spiritual realm, that's where investiture comes from.
Shallan seems to think that they don't know that Ba-Edo Mishram is trapped in the spiritual realm, though. Like, that was the information gained from Kalak.
Which they're about to learn, presumably.
Okay. Yeah.
Which they now know, but they wouldn't have when they first started to seek out Ba-Edo Mishram in her prison.
Right.
which maybe is why they
Yeah.
couldn't find her. They didn't think to look in the spiritual realm. How would they even get there?
I
Apparently, you gotta hop the Dalinar taxi.
yeah, I have such conflicting feelings on this whole spiritual realm thing. Like, it seems so gimmicky, but also I am curious, like, just as a here's what I'll say. As a huge Cosmere fan, I am very interested in learning about the spiritual realm. For me personally. From a casual Stormlight reader, like if you've just picked up The Way of Kings and gone all the way through Wind and Truth, this seems really odd to include. That's just how I feel about it. Like, I have friends who've just read Stormlight and they just care about Stormlight. They don't care about anything else. All of a sudden, we're diving into the spiritual realm. I don't know. It feels a little weird.
I agree. It also, I guess I'm gonna preface this by Skyward spoilers, which is non-Cosmere.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You both read Skyward?
Yeah.
I
Or
haven't read Defiant, but
Okay.
which is fine. I'm not super attached to Defiant.
No Defiant spoilers, but up through Cytonic.
Yeah,
So
I
I
have
guess
read.
skip this part if you haven't read Skyward. But I know that Sanderson was waffling for a long time whether Skyward would be Cosmere. And I've always seen a lot of parallels between how kind of the universe works between the Cosmere and Skyward in terms of you've got the nowhere. So he kind of has his own little cognitive realm and spiritual realm that exist that we kind of learn about in Cytonic. And Cytonic's plot is literally Spensa going on a quest to the spiritual realm to learn about her past. Does that sound familiar to you?
True. If you put it that way, yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why I'm so hesitant about it, because honestly, I couldn't care less about Spencer going to learn about her past. Like, there are some interesting things, but mostly I was like, can we get out of this place? Maybe
Yeah,
it'll be different because I really care about Stormlight, but we'll see.
If I was ranking all of the Sanderson stories I've read, I think the bottom would be Gift of Elantris, but then right above that would be Cytonic. Like, I really just didn't enjoy Cytonic at all.
I really enjoyed Skyward and Starsight. Or
yeah,
Skyward was like a solid 9 out of 10 for me. Starsight goes down a little bit. Cytonic, I couldn't tell you a thing about Cytonic, I'll be honest.
Yeah, Cytonic suffered from the single POV thing because he isolated Spensa from every other character we knew. And then also just the plot line of like, I'm going to be nowhere near what else is happening. And just, I don't know, like just the plot just didn't, I agree. Like, I was like, can you please leave now so we can get back to the plot? Like, it didn't feel like part of the plot. So, but I feel like maybe that was Sanderson practicing almost for what's going to happen in Stormlight 5.
And he said he does that, right? He's with the Secret Project specifically. He said, I was deliberately practicing something I've wanted to try before throwing it into something big. So, anyway,
End of Skyward discussion.
Yeah. Anything else on Shallan before we move on?
Yeah, I had 2 mechanics I wanted to talk about really quick with Shard Blade and Shard Plate. One, Shallan is expecting Testament to show up in the room with her, and Testament isn't there. I think that it's based on the bond strength, but the bond strength really gives a mind to Testament because the Spren, they choose to fade over. So I think Testament just doesn't have enough of a mind left to choose to fade over if she wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, Testament can enter the physical realm as a blade, which is different than the way they enter to be. It's always been a little confusing to me. But I guess, like, when they enter as a Spren, they're not metal, when usually investiture in the physical realm is metal. But then when they become shard blades, they are metal. So I've never really grasped like what's exactly happening there, but because we got the same thing with like we've got the armor spren who are normal spren, but then they can enter as metal, like, and it's only when they actually enter as metal is when they disappear from the cognitive realm. So it's almost like everyone on Roshar kind of gets a little peek into the cognitive realm, some more than others,
Right.
where they're actually just seeing the cognitive realm spren like a shadow in the physical realm, so they're not actually there, compared to when a radiant actually pulls them into the physical realm, they become metal. Maybe I'm talking through this myself right now. I didn't.
No, it makes sense to me that, and it just brings me circling back to the Syl thing that we've been discussing, and as she's being pulled or walking deliberately further into the physical realm, yeah, I don't know if there was much to that thought beyond that, but that it just made me think of, okay, now what would Syl look like now on the cognitive realm? Is she not there? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Is yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what to say.
I wanted to also talk about how we got a picture. So people who only listen to the audio, definitely check out the picture after chapter. It's right after the first chapter 16, I think.
We get capes.
More
No
importantly,
capes.
we get canonical renderings of Testament and Pattern as shard blades.
No, we get capes. That's the important thing. All right, let me look at this again.
And they look very different from each other. And I'm wondering, and I haven't gone back and done this because new baby, but if I have the time, I want to go back and recheck every description of a shard blade Shallan has ever summoned and see which one's which.
Are these labeled?
They are not, unfortunately, I was about to say, they're not labeled. We don't know which
Okay.
one's Pattern and which one's Testament, but we at least know that their descriptions are extremely different.
Right.
And I do remember at one point Shallan describing a shard blade she summons as having like that cryptic pattern on the hilt,
Right.
which obviously one of these has it and the other doesn't. So I'm assuming that these, she's drawing her own shard plate here, and you can see the satchel. I'm assuming these are her two shard blades she's also sketched.
Yeah, so I was with you until about 10 seconds ago. I'm obviously this one on the right is a cryptic. Like that would seem to make sense with everything we've ever seen. This one on the left looks more like Nightblood than anything. Like this does not look like a cryptic to me. This looks like a sword.
I'm curious how much the sword manifesting is based off of the user's perception of it, because we've found that the shard plate is heavily influenced by Shallan's perception and her mental image.
I think even more so, like with the Sapience brand, just to expand on your point, the Sapience brand chooses how they appear, because it's not like Kaladin saying, be this exact thing. It's Syl being like, I want to look like this. Oh, now I want to be a spear. Now I want to be a shield, right? We get that right away when he says the third ideal against Zeth. So perhaps, it is along the lines of what you said, where Pattern is able to envision himself as this fancy sword, but
Right.
Testament, because she's dead and wasn't locked into a specific shape like the other dead shard blades, is now just like, I guess I'm a sword, right? Doesn't have that full mental processy to
Okay.
be different, which makes me wonder if the time in the chasms when the sword was growing and shrinking, does that mean that was Pattern? I'd love to. Does Kaladin describe it? Does Shallan describe it? Like, that's what I want to know. But at the same time, we don't know which sword is which in this picture, so it's a little frustrating. But it's definitely maybe Sanderson going, okay, I figured out which sword was which, and I'm going to sprinkle in little clues through this book.
I think you're right.
You're slowly winning me over.
I think it's more likely that it is the two different shard blades, and that's their default forms. I want to know if, since we're getting a spy book, if we're going to get stealth on her, if she can envision it just right.
Like a bulletproof vest under her shirt? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm talking about. I'm not sure how that could play out.
Imagine just a
other than
little
that.
girl walks up to you, like a little girl walks up to you, and then just punches you on the arm, and you go flying across.
Yeah.
Terrifying, actually. We get more and more hints that, like, there was the whole conversation about how Kaladin was able to control his shard plate way better than Shallan can. And is this a Windrunner versus Lightweaver thing, or is this a Kaladin versus Shallan thing? And it's frustrating that we don't know.
Right.
And of course, Yasna has never even thought to try to share her shard plate with someone else. So
Yeah, Shallan seems to think it's a Spren thing. She's gonna go get them tutoring, but we'll see how trustworthy that is.
yeah, or maybe she thinks of the Spren as simple.
Could be.
All right. Well, there's bigger things to talk about. Maybe we should move on to those things.
All right,
Everyone's waiting
cultivation.
for us to talk about it.
Cultivation. Okay, here we go. I'm going to briefly summarize this cultivation thing, and then I want to talk about it. So, cultivation walks up to Dalinar. Dalinar seems kind of like accusatory in the audiobook. I'm not sure if that came across for you guys, but Dalinar seems like pretty confrontational with cultivation, as far as Michael Kramer's voice goes. But cultivation, which we talked about last week or the week before, it was last week. We talked about this, that cultivation, as she's approaching Dalinar, has a big key piece of information that she either could or not include. She does not include it. She does not tell Dalinar that Taravangian is Odium, which is, a big puzzle piece, especially in this next chapter when Hoyd is like, okay, I know it's not Ray's. And the reader knows who it is, but everybody else is like, I'm barely grasping what you're talking about, Hoyd. And Hoyd's freaking out. So cultivation deliberately does not tell Dalinar that it's Taravangian, tells him, I don't know, do you guys want to like summarize this conversation real quick? Because she's like telling him about, hey, when's the last time you saw Odium scared? Like being really weird about it. And Dalinar says, when I said unite them. And cultivation's like, yeah, exactly. So go unite them. Dalinar's like, that could mean anything. Please help me. And cultivation says, okay, so honor's power is in the spiritual realm. You got to go unite it.
Yeah,
What?
there's a lot to unpack.
What?
First of all, yeah, Dalinar, I almost feel like Dalinar was taking on the role of the reader.
Yeah.
Where the reader's like, please, can I have an answer? Please, like channeling the fans who ask Sanderson questions every day.
I don't want to have to earn it myself. Just tell me.
Exactly. And then cultivation said Raffo. But gave a little. So yeah, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is honor wasn't splintered according to cultivation.
Yeah, according to cultivation. So I want to talk about this. Based on those two things, she didn't tell him about Taravangian, and she tells him that honor is intact in the spiritual realm. Okay, whether that is true or not, I think cultivation is trying to get Odium out of the contest. I think she's trying to avoid the contest, and I'll explain here. She tells Dalinar, okay, hey, go to the spiritual realm and go figure out honor's power. Just tells him some vague hints about, honor's power, go unite it. I think that she thinks that Dalinar can't handle it and is going to go die. And if Dalinar dies, the contract is void and Odium leaves. because in the interlude beforehand, she made eye contact with Taravangian, and Taravangian said, only one god remaining. Like, that's how we solve the problem. So, and then Cultivation walks off. So Cultivation just made the conclusion of, I got to get rid of this guy. I need him off Roshar. What, like, just in the short term, get stronger, whatever, go get help. I need him off Roshar. I think Cultivation's plan here is to void the contract, to get rid of Dalinar, so that the contract is void and Odium leaves. I think that's Cultivation's plan.
I have thoughts, but like a different path to the same destination of voiding the contest.
Okay.
Because what happens if Dalinar ascends to honor before the contest of champions happens?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because first of all, how do you fulfill the contract of Dalinar becoming a fused for Odium if he is the vessel for honor? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But also, contracts between shards are unbreakable. So how do you, like, what's going to happen there? And I'm wondering if that causes big problems.
Right.
And that's Cultivation's plan, is to cause those big problems. So that's where some of my head is going on that. The other part of my head is going, this entire time, we've been told that Odium splintered honor. And I'm wondering, were we actually told that? But assuming that we weren't wrong, and Cultivation's just blatantly lying to Dalinar here, could that be that Cultivation understands that intent and perception have a big component to magic systems, and if Dalinar perceives honor as not splintered, maybe that allows him to reform honor, even if he is splintered? Because it's kind of like the opposite of like what wax does with bullets and like guns. Like, most people see it as just, it's a gun, so you push the gun, the center of mass of the gun. But if you can understand each individual part, then you can push on individual parts. Whereas
Sure.
This is the opposite. People consider honor to be splintered, so they see him as all these disparate parts. But if Dalinar can be convinced that honor is one thing, then he can ascend to the concept of honor. So my head is going so many different ways, and I don't know what even like I would like die on the hill for, but those are my initial thoughts, and I don't have more. But
I'm with you that even if Dalinar could figure it out and go become ascend to honor, whatever, or Kaladin does, or whatever that means, what does that do to the contract? I don't know. Like, Cultivation obviously knows, but we don't. So yeah, I think Cultivation's plan is to void the contract based on this conversation, because she didn't tell him. She didn't tell him. And like, you know, her credibility just went way down, way down.
yeah, like Dalinar's like, please just tell me something. And she could have easily told him, by the way, Odium is Taravangian now.
Your
But
old
instead
buddy?
she tells him something that we're like, is that even true?
Right.
And if it is true, Sanderson, where did you sprinkle hints of that? Because he doesn't just do that, right? In his stories, he never just like says, oh, by the way, it's this thing. There's always hints. We miss the hints most of the time, but they're there. So I'll be interested to know if this ends up being true or not.
Yeah. She specifically tells him, you can go to the spiritual realm and you might be able to come back. And I'm like, what?
You might even be able to come back from it.
Yeah, like, what?
Maybe she's planning for him to ascend while still in there.
Maybe.
I'm
That's
the only
assuming
way to
that's the pathway back.
Okay.
I'm also assuming, from a meta perspective, this is going to be a vehicle to learn about Roshar's past.
Okay.
Because he's going to get more visions.
Oh, because he asked the storm. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm with you.
He's going to enter the spiritual realm and he's going to be able to control what he sees, as opposed to the Stormfather picking and choosing very specific events to show. Stormfather's like, but I didn't show you those things because I didn't wanna, right?
Right.
So it's not
That
fair
wasn't-
that you can go and do it yourself,
That wasn't in the instruction manual.
right?
As an aside, the Stormfather here looks very much like the Stormfather from the prologue. So that helps settle it in my mind that it definitely is the prologue or the Stormfather there in the prologue, just showing a different side of himself than we've seen so far.
You're talking about like the warping of the air stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
The warping of the air plus keeping secrets, admitting to keeping secrets.
Okay.
But here's a question, Tim and Trevor, of course. Is it the Stormfather?
That Dalinar's talking to?
Uh-huh.
Of course. No, don't do this. Of course it is.
No,
Why would it
but
not be?
is it the last vestige of honor? Vestige of honor. Is it
Could be.
Tanavast's cognitive shadow? Like we talked about how the Stormfather is different now.
Right.
That he thinks he has become the bondsmith of the Stormfather. Has he actually connected to honor and is in the process of ascending to honor? Odium, like the moment that scares Odium, I thought was pretty clear, which is when Dalinar unites the realms and Odium says he wasn't supposed to ascend.
That is true. He does use capital A ascend.
So is Dalinar actually a bondsmith for the Stormfather, or is that what Honor's cognitive shadow, or the vestige of honor, the Tanavast shadow, is that what he wants Dalinar to think? And that's why Dalinar is able to do things he shouldn't be able to do. So yeah, that was kind of somewhere my mind went. But does it matter? Like, where's the real Stormfather if that's the case? But
I think the Stormfather perhaps became more than he was before, and so this is the real Stormfather. But he stood up.
yeah, at what point do you become a different entity, though? I guess could still lend into what I'm saying. Like,
Definitely
calls himself the Stormfather still, but he's definitely beyond what the Stormfather traditionally was. And maybe that's something that Dalinar is going to learn in his visions, is like, wait a minute, the Stormfather is not the same. So there's more to this. But I just like the idea of it. It isn't even the Stormfather at all, just because that scratches an itch in my brain of like, oh gosh, Sanderson, you did it again. But that might be a bit more out there than he would go.
That's a corner under the rug that I just want to push back down and not think about it.
Right. I just see Sanderson like rubbing his hands and chuckling as we all.
Yeah. Tim, what's Cultivation doing?
Oh my goodness. I think she obviously very much planned for Teravangian to take over from Race. I think there are really two main options. One, Teravangian's gone crazy and she's just realized she made a huge mistake. Or two, she expected this to happen. Maybe it's a little bit different. And she's just continuing to work towards some larger goal. But I've thought about what could she want. And she doesn't seem like the type of being that wants more power or control. She really just wants to help things grow. So perhaps this is just meeting that almost need within her to see things continue on, move forward, grow, where they had been stagnant for so long with honor and cultivation and odium fighting it out. But when we were talking about honor being splintered or not, I was trying to remember for the shards that we saw or that we've heard that Odium killed. I remember, is it Threnody? He killed the shards. It was like 3 shards battled.
Yes, it was Odium, Ambition, and Mercy.
And there, because I remember one time he like shattered it and it was just dispersed. Another one, he took all of the investiture and just threw it into was it the cognitive or the spiritual realm?
The cognitive realm. Devotion and dominion are hanging out in the cognitive realm.
So maybe with this one, either Honor or Odium shoved him into the spiritual realm to try and get rid of him. Because every time that he's done something, it hasn't turned out quite like he expected it to be. It's been very destructive.
I can give Cultivation a pass that she's telling half truths. She's lying by omission, obviously, but is the information she's giving true? Maybe it might be. I'd be fine with that. I still think her goal in giving Dalinar this info at this time is she just learned new information about Odium. Odium is still coming to the conclusion that there needs to be one god. And I think, Tim, to what you were saying is either she made a big mistake and she thought Teravangian would solve that problem on Odium and it didn't. So now the plan is, okay, we need to shove Odium off into the Cosmere. I'll see you later. We can figure that problem out for another day. I think that's what's happening here. I think she's trying to void the contract and Odium leaves.
Would he even leave, though? Because he doesn't have to leave. I think part of his desire to stay is he's safe from being attacked by other shards.
Right, but what's Teravangian's goal? What's Todium's goal? He told us in the interlude.
Okay, yeah, true. Go destroy everyone.
And save them all, right? That's his what he's telling himself he's doing, and then he comes to the conclusion that there's only one god. You could easily say, okay, save them all means I'm going to turn over here to planet 174 and go conquer it and save them. You know, whatever. I think Teravangian has eyes for the Cosmere, certainly, if he's given that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I think we talked about this last week. I think he wants to remove certain aspects of free will in the way that Wax was asking Harmony to do. And Harmony's like, I could do it. So even Harmony's like, yeah, that's a thing a shard can do. But all the shards so far that we've met are unwilling to do so because there's certain consequences to that.
True.
But
yeah,
I mean, Ruin wanted to kill everybody, but he didn't want to. I mean, he probably came the closest to just mind controlling people.
Well, he literally did.
Yeah.
With the Inquisitors.
And so, but at the same time, like Marsh still had free will at the end there. So it was more like bodily control and like manipulation, not what Odium seems to want to do, which is remove the ability for people to suffer, which, as we learned from Harmony, means removing the ability for them to live their lives. It has echoes of the Matrix as well, where like the original Matrix was just like super happy for everybody and no one accepted it.
Right.
Yeah, I think Odium's goals are a lot more clear than Cultivation goals for sure. And I do think about, like, I've always grouped Cultivation and Ruin kind of in the same category of shard. Like if we were going to try to categorize, which I'm not going to get into right now, but I've tried to categorize the shards into groups of 4 based on the Dawn shard that kind of was used to splinter them out. And I would always put Ruin and Cultivation together because they're both about change. They would use the change Dawn shard. So Cultivation wants to see things change in the same way that Preservation did not and Ruin did. And so I agree with what you said there, Trevor, where Cultivation's like, we've been at a status quo for too long. Let's nudge things to be different, because I like things growing and changing and becoming different.
Yeah.
I do want to bring up, there is canonically people in the Cosmere who do think that honor was splintered, specifically the Arcanum Unbounded Roshar system essay written by Chris, who is probably the most knowledgeable non-vessel in the entire Cosmere, just says that Odium splintered honor in that system essay. The exact wording is, surely many of the spren that now exist on the planet have arisen from the friction between honor, cultivation, and odium. Odium, be aware that this system is the current habitation of the shard of odium on the physical and cognitive realms. This shard undoubtedly caused the splintering of devotion, dominion, honor, and perhaps others through the Cosmere. So she's saying the exact things that cultivation's like, people think this, but it's not true. The two things, which is that the spren are of a result of splintering honor, and also that honor is splintered. And she directly contradicts both of those things. So she would disagree with Chris here, or at least outwardly. It's
Right.
just she's like, I hate the unless she's lying parenthetical at the end of this entire conversation, but
Right.
it's like, by the way, that system essay is written by someone in world and is wrong. Like, it's so annoying that can be true, but
I think she's lying.
she did make a good point. The spren existed before honor was splintered. So like, I've always been like, what chicken and the egg there, right?
Sure.
How can they be the result of splintering honor when they existed before honor was splintered? The Radiant Orders existed before honor was splintered. Like,
I think that it's halfway there. I think Odium's power is in the spiritual realm, but it is splintered. And that's why Dalinar is unity. Or you're right, Honor's power is splintered, but it's in the spiritual realm. And so Dalinar needs to unite them in order to bring a shard back together. I don't think it's going to be honor. I think he's going to bring together a shard called unity.
that's interesting. That kind of plays with one of your older theories, Trevor.
Yeah.
I think it's more reasonable than saying there's a shard we haven't heard of yet and it's called unity. Just because, ruin and preservation can become harmony, which then can become discord. Like there's the vessel kind of has some influence on the shard's name and function to an extent. So it might make sense that part of honor was ripped away. It's the Tanavest is no longer the vessel. If Dalinar becomes the vessel, like it could be renamed Unity. And then,
I think unity is an aspect of honor. It's what holds you together. And so it could be just a perspective shift, or it could be something that he's got like a half of honor or 3/4 of honor. So he's got the true half shards.
Where Sharon's calling everything something they shouldn't.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that.
Yeah, let's not. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else we can say about this, and we just have to Rafo, but
right.
Something's got to give here. There's too much conflicting info.
Yeah. I mean, based on what this book has shown us, I think we're going to learn quick. I think this is going to be in day 3 or by the end of day 2. But
so that leads me to, when are they going to figure out that it's Taravangian? So Hoyd has figured out that it's not Ray's, but they haven't connected the dots that it is Taravangian.
I could see them finding out or figuring out when Odium's behavior changed. And from that, realizing, I think Wit is aware of just how powerful Nightblood is. So I could see him putting it together, but it's a solid question. It could go either way.
The problem is Zeth is already gone with Nightblood. And I don't think Zeth told anybody what happened there. So
I'm really curious because I thought this would be day 9 questions, not day 2 questions. So I always assumed that for the last 3 years or whatever, that Dalinar would walk up to the top of the tower and see Taravangian and be like, oh no. Like, everything I know about what's about to happen is wrong. Everything. Is that not going to be the case? Is he going to figure that out beforehand?
I think that's not going to be the case. I think this book is going in a completely different direction than we expected.
Yeah.
I don't know what direction that is yet, but
Obviously,
it's not what I expected.
only 10 days, apparently.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was a very strong proponent of the Contest of Champions happening early in the book.
Yeah, me too.
And now I'm convinced it's not going to.
Mhm.
We could lead that into, I know we want to talk about the loopholes.
Yeah, if only briefly. I know we're running long. But
Yeah.
the loophole thing. I just want to highlight real quick, just to start this. The fact that Taravangian is now exploiting loopholes, according to everything that Hoyd just revealed to us, if Hoyd's right, blah, blah, all of the asterisks out of the way. If Taravangian is the one exploiting loopholes, that brings us back to the question we had like 6 episodes ago of, okay, where are these armies coming from? Because we thought we came to the conclusion that this is a Raise plan, and Raise was putting all these armies, and they were all going to jump through their portals at the same time, take a bunch of stuff, and they, over several pages, talk about, okay, this can't be Raise. So now I'm thinking, okay, how did Taravangian get 3 separate armies in the cognitive realm overnight? I'm now back on the train of these armies are really dumb. Like, I thought they were pretty cool when they were assigned to Raise, but they explicitly just told us that they're not. Now I'm back in the camp of, okay, that I think this is dumb. But that just want to put that out there.
It's possible that Raise had a different plan for those armies, and Taravangian was like, oh, actually, we're doing this now. He looked at the state of the chessboard, and he said, this was what Raise's plan was, but with where they are now, I can redirect them and do this loophole. That at least in my head, that at least is fine. Like, I'm not like, oh, this is dumb.
Sure.
And to be fair, only one of the armies is in the cognitive realm. And that was something that he had to conquer the perpendicularity. So that was a long term plan that I assume was in place from before he knew when the Contest of Champions would happen. Of, I'm in a stalemate here. I need to break it. So I need to get an army here. And that's what I'm going to do. And then the other two, there's a fused army going for the Shattered Plains, and then there's the fleet going towards Thalina. And those two, I think the fused army can move very quickly. They even mentioned that Heavenly Ones could fly most of them out pretty far. So I think that was a last minute addition by Taravangian. And then I think the fleet was just something that Taravangian decided, okay, if we put all of our people here, we could break this. And then that's how I take this one piece. That was this army in the cognitive realm. And then I basically conquer all of Roshar.
Real quick, this is not super important, but I just wanted to point it out because I noticed it. That army of Fuse that's headed for the Shattered Plains, in audiobook version, the audiobook says there are several thousand fused headed for the Shattered Plains. And in written version, it says there is 1,000 fused headed for the Shattered Plains. And it's one of those very infrequent moments when I'm both looking at the word and listening at the same time. Like, I usually switch back and forth the last couple weeks, but I just happened to be reading along with it at the time. And it was a whole little number thing that discrepancy.
So yeah, that could be a case of the audiobook narrators getting a slightly older revision.
Right.
I hate that that kind of thing's unavoidable, but it is a little glimpse into like how this might have been revised at the
Right.
last second based on some feedback. Like, how are there several thousand fused there? But
Right.
again, I don't think it makes a difference. Like, I don't think it changed the story. So,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think it's important. I just
Yeah.
noticed it, so I just wanted to point it out.
What I want to talk about with loopholes is there's a very good reason Raze doesn't use loopholes. He talks about it, and we know this to be true, that it sets you up, makes you vulnerable to attack. Teravangian would know this because he has all of Odium's knowledge. So, but Teravangian's willing to do it anyway. He's willing to open himself up to attack. So either he thinks there's no shard that's going to attack him, or he doesn't care, or like, why is he willing to use loopholes when Raze wasn't?
I think that he's new to this. And so even though he has access to all of this, it's not all in the front of his mind. And I think this is part of Cultivation's plan, or one of her options that she is prepared for. Is she's motivating him to move in that direction so that he can be vulnerable, and she's been hiding, but if she can get some help, she can attack and take him down, or maybe combine him with Unity and make Rhythm of War or the Shard of War.
Yeah, I had a similar thought that Cultivation maybe specifically picked someone who could not resist using loopholes.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
One thing that stuck out to me was it specifically says that Race could not actually break this. Not that he just wouldn't, but he was not able to. So why is it different when there's a different vessel?
Maybe because Raze said he wouldn't.
And then that doesn't apply to Teravangian because he didn't say he wouldn't?
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's my thought just now, but so like almost part of the contract is Raze won't try to find loopholes. And maybe that's what Hoyt is seeing. He's like, part of this contract, we don't get to see the full written contract, but he's going over it with a dragon, by the way, which is,
yes,
we were almost right. He did reach out to Frost, and Frost was like, nah, fam. So he reached out to a different dragon,
Frost's sister,
who I assume is a dragon. Frost,
yeah,
the dragon's
okay.
sister would also be a dragon. And he's using a bone to communicate with her, which apparently is something in Dragonsteel Prime or something like that.
I didn't know about that either.
Yeah, I saw some people talk about. I didn't read Dragonsteel Prime, but apparently a little homage to that. So I don't know. People talk about things, and I'm like, wow, there's still things I don't know about the Cosmere. But anyway, that's a side point. And they're pouring over it, and maybe part of the contract literally like is written out. Ray says he won't look for loopholes. He's going to honor the spirit of the contract. And if it specifically calls out Raze, then that might be why Hoyt is like, but he is using loopholes, therefore it's not Raze.
Yeah, maybe.
And that maybe is how the conclusion came about. Because like, why? Yeah, like why would there be that conclusion of loopholes equals not Raze?
One option is how Preservation and Ruin were so affected by their shards that eventually they were no longer able to do certain things where people who were new to it were still able to. I think that could be coming into play here as well.
That's a really good point. That could be an alternate explanation, or maybe a blending of the two options.
Mm-hmm.
The shard can't control Teravangian as much right now.
Interesting thought.
It's like, when someone would first take the well's power, right? They would be able to do things that are definitely not preservation-y.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then like when Sazed first ascended, he was able to remake the whole world. But I don't think he could do that now.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, do we want
Teravangian's first action from ascending is, I want loopholes. I'm going to do that while I can. Remake the world? Nah. Loopholes.
Do we want to mention anything from the King's meeting, or got one last note? I know it's getting a little bit long.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly touch on the King's meeting, especially the fact that we get it from Adolin's point of view, and he doesn't like his dad at all.
He's been brewing.
Yeah. And an interesting thing with that is it always, whenever someone is like that in their POV, it always makes me think, are they struggling with an ideal?
Fair enough. Yeah.
And if so, what would that ideal be? And would it be, is he bonding Maya as an edge dancer, or is this something else? So I wanted to bring that up at least.
Ooh, is there a forgiveness ideal that like
Could be.
Evie was in on? Because that was a big thing for her, was telling Evie telling Dalinar she forgave him. Anyway,
I think a large part of it is just, sometimes normal people have to go through stuff and they don't get a reward at the end.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
I
had to deal with all of my trauma and I didn't get superpowers out of it.
I'm very much of the camp that I want Adolin to be normal. But set that aside.
Mm-hmm. That actually really ties in with the other things I wanted to bring up. Seems like Shab, the Light Weaver, also needs to talk with Kaladin and work out some of his feelings, or someone else who's learned from him. And
wasn't there like a specific guy in Kaladin's group who was particularly like named a lot?
Yeah, he actually has a point of view. He's at the end of Rhythm of War. He's kept by the Ardens. They're like, don't talk to that guy, you're gonna get depressed. And Kaladin brings him out and has him talk to other depressed guys, and they figure it out. And he's actually involved in the battle for Eurythera at the end of Rhythm of War. He's one of the first to help Kaladin. I don't remember his name.
I wonder if he's kind of like an apprentice therapist, and he could be someone to talk to, maybe.
Yeah,
or like he's still continuing the groups, maybe.
That type of point of view, I always think of back half. I think that this is a plant or a seed for somebody in the back half that would actually become a character, but I don't know. Maybe.
The other thing I wanted to briefly touch on with the King's meeting is Adolin was under the impression that everyone would not listen to Dalinar, would like, he was very surprised that Dalinar was able to appease them and that Yanagon defended Dalinar, and then Queen Fen came around and they're actually working together. They're kind of in unity, and Dalinar's actually doing his bondsmith job of keeping everyone together, and he's very good at it. And Adolin is super jaded about that. But I think that that's something that Sanderson wanted to point out, is like, look, Dalinar's actually gotten really good at this uniting thing.
Yeah. So, and something I wanted to point out, Adolin and Yanagon have a brief conversation on the way to the meeting. Small conversations like that on a way to like a big scene that you're presenting is actually something that I think Sanderson does really well. Would I have ever wanted, like, or expected or waited with bated breath for an Adolin and Yanagon conversation? No. Was that on my bingo card? No. Is it a cool conversation of like where they both are, and Adolin sees a little bit of himself in Yanagon, of like, oh, I was there a couple years ago. Wow, this guy's really mature. Why aren't I mature? Like, just really cool self-reflection moments like that between two characters you would never expect to interact, I think is actually really cool. And just brief glimpses of that in a book that has so much to do, but you still stop for like little character moments like that, I think is actually really cool.
He's also really impressed that Yanagon was able to learn Alethi so quickly.
Yeah.
I think we're being set up to have kind of a plot of Yanagon being a much more competent than we assume.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's funny that Adolin's like, oh, you know what'll solve his problems? A little practice with the sword. Like, that's always his go-to.
Let's go swing a stick around for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else?
I think we covered the big stuff.
I agree. All right, we can call it there. Thanks for joining me this week, David and Tim. We will reconvene next week.
Looking forward to it.
See you on the flip side.